And all these have been completely analysed from the point of view of the various studies. Now, as you might imagine, to examine the whole of the New Testament is quite a big job, particularly as Blavatsky spoke so much about the Apocalypse, or the book of Revelation, the last book of the Bible, called the book of the Revelation, but often referred to as the Apocalypse, because like the book of Daniel in the Old Testament, it's full of apocalyptic writing. And perhaps it's a good moment at the start of this lecture to talk about apocalyptic writing. Apocalyptic writing was produced for a number of reasons. The principal reason in the case of the book of Revelation was because it had to be written in a secret code. Some of the material put in the book could have resulted in the writer or the distributor of the book or the writings being thrown to the lions and arrested by the Romans and thrown to the lions. So it wasn't exactly the safest of material. It was also because apocalyptic writing uses imagery. And sometimes esoteric writing, which is what is also involved here, involves imagery. And esoteric writing itself is chosen because it involves the talking about the unseen things. And the unseen things, of course, refer to the spiritual realm, the realm that lies behind this physical realm in which we live at the moment in our earth lives, and occupies some degree of interest in all the world's religions, quite apart from theosophy. And one of the reasons why theosophy is so comprehensive and covers the world religions is because it attacks the whole problem of communicating spiritual truths with physical words, which are incredibly difficult. And sometimes to paint a picture in someone's mind is more efficient than a carefully argued piece of logic. And certainly in the Bible, that occurs quite a lot. Actually occurs quite a lot in the writings of Jesus. As you know, the parables convey deep spiritual truths much more effectively than a direct statement would to most people. I mean, there are some people who are academic through and through, and a straightforward statement to them tells them everything. But the majority of us are not like that. We find pictures being painted in our imagination are extraordinarily helpful in taking us to the deeper truths. And the deeper truths are certainly a major problem in theosophy. A lot of people, we find it very difficult to get to terms with theosophy at all, because it is dealing with truths that are beyond our ordinary everyday physical experience in our physical lives. And in a sense, you know, that is a problem with all religions, because majority of religions turn out to be a sort of play act most of the time, and a few people go for the deep esoteric truths that lie beneath the surface of the teachings. It's equally true of Christian theology and all that. So we're told that the book Revelation is, in this particular case, called Revelation because it means unveiling of the prophetic spirit sent by Christ. It has 300 symbols with definite meanings. Well, I'm not going to work through all 300 this morning, I can assure you of that, because it wouldn't serve our purpose for today's work. And it also deals, and which has attracted a lot of attention from people down through history, a presentation which looks like the consummation of everything, the last great drama with all the fearsome things that are likely to happen at the end of time, and has been called the Armageddon, as you probably know. It deals in sevens. And it's rather nice that it deals in sevens, because we as theosophists are quite interested in the number 7. In fact, we rather like the number 7 and believe that the 7 has got some deeper meaning than just the counting from 1 up to 7. So the 7s, let's just have a look at some of them. The 7 churches, which of course is the opening gambit of the book. There are the 7 seals, the 7 trumpets, the 7 thunders, the 7 signs, the 7 last plagues, the 7 dooms, the 7 vials or bowls, and the 7 new things. Maybe a few other 7s as well, but that's enough to be getting on with. I think that's more than 7 sevens, which rather spoils it a bit. Everything symbols majesty and judgment. The whole concept of the whole concept of a God, which is a sort of superman, which we find so unacceptable in theosophy, penetrates the whole of this. The concept of there being a physical heaven where there's no sea, and the concept of God being there, the light of the, there is no sun or light needed because God is there as the light. It's all lovely stuff, but it's an indulgence, because as you probably know, theosophy doesn't believe that God can be thought about or visualized in any way at all. A being so unimaginable that it is not even referred to as a being, referred to as a principle, an absolute principle, a principle that pervades all space. There's nowhere you can go to evade and avoid this principle. This principle is there, interpenetrating the universe, interpenetrating the spiritual world as well as the physical world. It's eternal, beyond the range and reach of human thought. I find that extremely comforting, really, although it is very mysterious, because beyond the range and reach of thought is almost a prerequisite of a vision of God that encompasses the making of everything that exists. In fact, it goes even further than that. It's not the making of everything that exists, but the actual manifestation of self, the self-manifestation of a principle which is beyond the reach of our thoughts and imagination. And so the pages of Revelation assume that sort of God is there pulling the strings behind the stage and causing everything to happen, something which doesn't fit well in today's philosophy, and for deep thinking people it becomes totally unacceptable, because if you actually postulate that God is really like that, pulling the strings on marionettes, why does he pull strings that cause pain and suffering? You see, the whole thing is far, far deeper than is suggested by ordinary religion, and theosophy creates a space in which to generate a much more complex idea about God altogether and about the reason for everything that exists. However, there's no question at all that that the being, for want of a better word, as I said just now, does have a huge presence. Religion has many times, or the practice of religion has enabled people to catch a vision of the divine which they would never have caught just by reading words. The actual mechanisms and processes are deeply embedded in the experience of the true searcher after wisdom. But anyway, let's look at some of the imagery that is presented to us by the book of Revelation, just while we're passing it. Everything, we're told, symbolizes majesty and judgment. We're talked about clothed with a garment down to the foot. And, you know, in religion, that is still a common practice. It creates a sort of majesty which is, and dignity, and a sort of authority. Whether it's justified or not is quite another matter. Hair white like wool, wisdom of the Ancient of Days. Eyes as a flame. The eyes as a flame suggesting intelligence, bringing hidden things to light. Feet like unto fine brass. Brass symbolizes, we're told, judgment. Voice as the sound of many waters. Power and majesty inducing awe. And in talking about voice as the sound of many waters, it's also worth looking at the voice of many thunders, because ancient man was overawed by lightning and thunder, we're told. It was a huge experience. Well, it's quite an experience to us to get caught in a big thunderstorm. It has an awesomeness about it. Hands, the ministers of help and mercy. Mouth, the word, the law, the judgment. And countenance as the sun that shineth in its strength. And they're reminded of Moses when he came down from the mountain with the tablets of the 2 tablets of stone with the 10 Commandments engraved on, how the children, we're told the children of Israel couldn't look upon Moses' face because it had this Shekinah, this huge shining presence had been transferred, albeit temporarily, onto his face. Then the whole subject of war is looked at unabashed in the Revelation. War seems to be taken for granted to be a normal part of human life. And regretfully, I think we would have to agree with that. And in the things that have happened in our lifetimes, it seems that the news is of war more than anything else. In those days, of course, it was the horseman. Having a horse was a sign of strength and wealth and power, and that ran right the way down to the 19th stroke 20th century, didn't it? A horse was a very, very potent symbol if you had it. But we're told there are different coloured horses in the Revelation, and the white horse is of religion and witness, the red horse of universal war, the black horse of famine and scarcity, and the pale horse of pestilence and death. Because huge arguments have raged over the last few centuries about the translation of the Bible, about its authority and its origin. And it's worth just noting that I think modern scholarship has now reached a stage where it's pretty convinced that Ezra wrote the Old Testament in 200 BC, and that he had before him, as he wrote it, a lot of much more ancient documents which have not survived the pages of history. And therefore we are totally dependent upon Ezra and his collation of Jewish documents, religious documents, for our Old Testament. And once you realize that it's like that, and written by Ezra, you either have to believe, as some people do, that God took over Ezra's pen as he was writing, or that the original documents were not written by God, because God couldn't write it twice in 2 different forms and them both be right, at least not in most people's understanding of the nature of God. So it was either Ezra, it was all the people who wrote the documents that he used, it wasn't both. When it comes to the New Testament, of course, we're down to the Council of Nicaea, in 325 AD, when the bishops of the church were summoned together at Nicaea by the Pope and told to jolly well get together and get a common theology or stay there for the rest of their lives. Well, I think that sort of threat was enough to force them to write what's known as the Nicene Creed, which is used in the prayer book service for Holy Communion, and which is far more comprehensive than the Apostles' Creed, and a much more satisfying read altogether, about twice or three times the length of the Apostles' Creed. And the New Testament was put together at this Council of Nicaea. According to history, the book of the Revelation, which is what we're talking about this morning, was very highly argued. It was a very contentious thing to suggest this book went into the New Testament. And it was, I don't know whether it's right to say it got in by the skin of its teeth or what the arguments were that finally convinced people that the book of Revelation should form part of the Bible. When you look at the Bible, with its 39 chapters in the Old Testament, 27 chapters in the New Testament, and 14 chapters, or books, in the Apocrypha, not the Apocalypse, a big difference. You can see what a big thing it is. Now, if I take this copy of the Bible, which hasn't got the Apocrypha in, and turn to the beginning of the book of Revelation, that's the Revelation at the end of the Bible. It's a very, very small part of the Bible indeed, very small part, and it doesn't contribute very much to the theology of Christianity, I have to say. Anyway, when I first got this book written by Spirenberg about Blavatsky, I was full of excitement. I thought, wow, he must have dug up some really wonderful things that Blavatsky wrote. But in fact, she doesn't write anywhere near as deeply on the Bible as you'd imagine she would. And in at least one case, which I shall refer to later on in the talk, she says she wasn't allowed to divulge the true esoteric meaning of some of the quotations, and it makes a more general point about the writing of esoteric literature, and that is that you can understand it at different levels. So you can understand it at the superficial level, just reading the words like reading a newspaper, or you can begin to see the inner meanings. And you only begin to see the inner meanings when you know some of the related literature that cross-connects with it. It becomes a much more complicated thing. Blavatsky knew so much that unless you knew what Blavatsky knew, you wouldn't really fully understand what she wrote on these particular topics, because she's crossing over onto other ground, which helps to widen the picture and fill in the detail and give you a better idea. But she also blows a few ideas that have previously been quite willingly accepted by the Church in Revelation. The first one was to do with the criticism of the seven churches about they were neither cold nor hot. One of them was neither cold nor hot, and the writer puts in the words of Jesus, the ascended Jesus, incidentally, the words, because thou art neither hot nor cold, but lukewarm, I will spew thee out of my mouth. It's quite a well-known quotation from Revelation. The person who's lukewarm, person who doesn't take an attitude and put some energy into their beliefs, is not really taken seriously. The beliefs that relate to life and the reason for life and consciousness and existence are so profound that to be totally disinterested and lukewarm about the whole subject, it is really to be neither hot nor cold. I mean, it's right, the person who says, well, I'm an atheist, I don't believe in God, I don't believe that there's any meaning behind the universe or behind human life, he's taking a very strong negative position. But the person who says, well, I do believe that there is a deep meaning behind life, that I see in theosophy in particular a teaching which will enable me to understand more about my own life, about my own consciousness, about my own destiny. Do I have eternal life or don't I? Do I reincarnate or don't I? All these things become major issues. They're not for the person who's lukewarm, who really, whether by action, by deliberate action, or by the normal action of karma, gets spewed out by nature, spewed out of my mouth. There is the sense that they are a failure because they can't be energized to take these matters seriously. They're far more important than almost any other subject that you can study here at the university. That so many people don't even think about it. Let's move on a bit to look at one or two other things. She says, I'm going to swap notes, I think, if you don't mind, here, because yes, the Nicolaitans. She says she reads this from Revelation chapter 2 verse 6. But this thou hast, that thou hatest the deeds of the Nicolaitanes, which I also hate. This is supposed to be Jesus, the resurrected, the ascended Jesus again. But I have few things against thee, because thou hast them that hold the doctrine of Balaam, who taught Balak to cast a stumbling block before the children of Israel, to eat things sacrificed unto idols, and to commit fornication. So hast thou also them that hold the doctrine of the Nicolaitanes, which thing I hate. Now, she says, Blavatsky says, that the reason that this was put in was because the writer of Revelation, whom I've not referred to yet this morning, St. John the Divine, apparently permanently incarcerated on the island of Patmos, and stayed there till he died, a virtual solitary imprisonment. He wrote, we're told, Revelation while he was on Patmos. Why did he have this thing about the Nicholas? Well, Nicholas was one of the people selected by the apostles right at the very beginning of the church to distribute alms to widows in Jerusalem. And he was chosen because of his uprightness, because of his quality of character, because he was a good person. And yet we find him being criticized in the beginning of Revelation. And it turns out, according to Blavatsky, that the whole reason that he was criticized because he was married. You know, it started right back there at the very beginning of the church, this argument about whether priests should be married or not. Not that he was elected a priest, he was only elected a deacon, but as a deacon, John objected to him being married. And this argument about married clergy and married priests has run down all 2,000 years of the church's life. And it starts here, right at the beginning of the book of Revelation. It's extraordinary, isn't it? So she says he was wrongly motivated in criticizing the teaching of the Nicolaitanes, but that he was angry because Nicholas was a married man. And then still in chapter 2, we get the discussion about the white stone. Now, in those days, initiation was a really major thing in spiritual development. If you were really, really keen to develop yourself spiritually, you didn't join a monastery. You went off and went through this process of initiation. And what happened was that if you successfully went through the processes of initiation, which if any of you have studied it, were quite severe and demanded a lot of determination. You certainly weren't a lukewarm follower after spiritual truths if you went through the process of initiation. And if you were successful, you were given a white stone at the end. And this white stone indicated that you had succeeded successfully in passing all these various tests to examine your power and ability. And then there's this strange chapter or teaching about wormwood, the great star, that had apparently was either had in the past or was going to in the future terrorize humanity. And it probably has done and will do both, because there is one of these characteristics of this esoteric writing is that it can be seen to have been relevant to things that happened in history, and also at the same time be relevant as prophecy about things that will happen in the future. It's the most extraordinary thing about this writing, that it seems to have this dual quality, just as it has, as I said earlier, depths of interpretation. So it has, you wait till the end please, it has these various applicabilities to different phases of human history. But there is another suggestion, of course, that that the wormwood, the great star, was in fact a real star, not one of these things dreamed up to paint a picture or an imagination to tell you something, but actually a real star, and that the wise men, when they were studying the stars at the time of the birth of Jesus, were actually seeing another star that hadn't normally been there. And apparently this extra star in the sky is recorded in various other documents that date to that period of history. And it wasn't just the three wise men who were studying the sky who saw this star, but many other people who studied, the astronomers who studied the sky in other parts of the world as well and recorded it. And I think some of the most modern thinking about the interpretation of this strange star that appeared in the sky was that it was a huge meteorite. It was a huge meteorite. And as it approached the Earth, it looked like a star because it was incandescent. And furthermore, there was a fear that it would impact the Earth. In fact, it gave the Earth a near miss if other information from other sources is anything to go by, because being a huge chunk of material, it would have a gravitational field, and that gravitational field would interact with the Earth's gravitational field as it passed by, just as the Moon's gravitational field interacts with our Earth's gravitational field. So this meteorite would interact. And, you know, there were these stories about how in times gone by the sea was pulled up towards the north and then flooded back again, and many animals were killed and their carcasses are still mined on the north side of the Ural Mountains in Russia, because so many animals died by the the flowing of this water back to its normal levels. And so we go on from the flooding, which has been explained in all sorts of ways. We go on from there to look at the famous chapter 12. Now, chapter 12, when you first read it, you'd think, wouldn't you, when you looked at it, that it didn't have much esoteric teaching in it at all, that it was all sort of language that was to do with the day. I mean, the whole teaching of this part of the book of Revelation is teaching that is put into picture language, because then it can't be to the uninitiated, it can't be interpreted. I mean, one of the great things about the teaching of Revelation is that it enables Christians to communicate with each other without the Roman authorities knowing what it was. And very often it was the Roman authorities that were being talked about, and so it was a pretty tricky business to deal with it. I'll get some more stuff out here now. And so we go on to look at this question of chapter 12. Now, of all the comments that Blavatsky made about anything in all her writings, there probably isn't any particular thing that she commented on as much as Revelation chapter 12. And you might have to ask yourself, why should there be things in Revelation chapter 12 that wound Madame Blavatsky up to such a height of interpretation and explanation? And it's probably silly of me to talk about it without actually reading it to you, because it is, well, at least the first 17 verses anyway, because otherwise you won't know what she's talking about, and you won't know what I'm talking about either. And so it starts, there appeared a great wonder in heaven, not the star this time, but the woman, clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. It's a pretty good start, isn't it? I mean, the imagery that's building up in your brain, in your mind, as you hear these words, is pretty colossal. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth, and pained to be delivered. And there appeared another wonder in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his heads. And his tail drew the 3rd part of the stars of heaven, and it cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered, and to devour her child as soon as it was born. And she brought forth a man-child, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. And her child was caught up unto God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, that they should found her there 1,260 days. And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels, and prevailed not. Neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent, called the devil and Satan, which deceived the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. And I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, Now is come salvation and strength, and the kingdom of our God, and the power of his Christ. For the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accused them before our God day and night. And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb, and by the word of their testimony, and they loved not their lives unto the death. Therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and to the sea, for the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knoweth that he hath but a short time. And when the dragon saw that he was cast unto the earth, he persecuted the woman which brought forth the man-child. And to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, where she is nourished for a time and times and half a time from the face of the serpent. And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away of the flood. And the earth helped the woman. The earth opened her mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon cast out of his mouth. And the dragon was wroth with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keepeth the commandments of God, and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. And on that, Blavatsky, there are pages and pages, she writes. She writes in collected writings about the Logos, the 2 aspects of the Logos, or the Father-Son, which is where the secret doctrine starts, as you probably know, about the whole business of the periodicity of the Logos, about the bride of the former as the universe as nature in the abstract, and so on and so on. I mean, it really is a whole week's set of lectures to do the whole thing, so I can't do the whole thing. Then we swap to Secret Doctrine, Volume 2. She says, the archaic tradition found in chapter 12 of St. John's Revelation comes from the Babylonian legends without the smallest doubt, though the Babylonian story had its origin in the allegories of the Aryans. So there you go, Babylon and back to the Vedas. But most importantly, she writes this in The Secret Doctrine, Volume 2, page 497. Hath John's revelation been written during the Vedic period, which of course is much earlier? The Vedas is the oldest documents, oldest religious documents in the world. Blavatsky says in one place they could be as much as 30,000 years old. So we're going right back to the dawn of history. She says, and were not one sure now of its being simply another version of the Book of Enoch and the dragon legends of pagan antiquity, the grandeur and beauty of the imagery might have biased the critic's opinion in favour of the Christian interpretation of that first war, whose battle was Star Him, and the first slaughterers, the angels. As the matter now stands, she says, one has to trace Revelation event by event to other and far older visions. For the better comprehension of the apocalyptic allegories and of the esoteric epos, we ask the reader to turn to Revelation and to read chapter 12 from verses 1 to 7. Well, we've done that already. This has several meanings, most of which have been found out without regard to the astronomical and numerical keys of this universal myth. That which may be given now is a fragment, a few hints as to its secret meaning, as embodying the record of a real war, the struggle between the initiates of 2 schools. Many and various are the still existing allegories built on that same foundation stone. The true narrative, that which gives the full esoteric meaning, is in the secret books, but the writer has had no access to these. So she dangles a huge, great, luscious carrot in front of us, telling us that there are other secret books which have the full meaning of some of these myths and pictures, and which can't in any way be accessed even by her herself. And it goes on page after page, this study of the chapter 12. And she talks about the whole business of the war described in that chapter and in the Apocalypse. Of course, has been the source of a whole lot of material which has become part of the Christian teaching, which isn't really part of the actual Christian literature itself. This whole business about the devil being cast out of heaven, and they choose just one verse from the New Testament to justify that when the disciples came back from this tour that he sent them on to teach the teachings of mainly the teachings of the Mount of Olives, and they come back and they say, oh, the devils are subject to us, and we were able to heal people and all sorts of things. And in response to that, Jesus is recorded as saying, I saw Satan fall as lightning from heaven. And so that is used to justify these words, the interpretation of these words about this war in heaven and about the devil being an angel that was cast out from heaven through disobedience. But it is by no means conclusive evidence that it does fulfill one of the great things of biblical analysis and interpretation, that you use one verse in one part of the Bible to support the interpretation of another verse, so that it's not just a free-for-all, saying, I think the verse means this and I think the verse means that. If you can bring several verses from different parts of the Bible to bear on the same subject, you can raise the quality and the credibility of a particular interpretation. And this is exactly what is happening here, that people are doing that. Perhaps I should leave it. I think there was one other passage from chapter 12 that I was going to read to you. I think we move the whole business of the bottomless pit and everything else. It becomes a huge study. In fact, there is one other thing that I wanted to raise, and that is here. She refers to, when it says to a part of the a time and a half a time, she says, it is as plainly as could be stated in chapter 12 that the angel has in mind the 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. Well, as you know, Rome was built upon 7 hills, and so it's widely taken that this idea of the whole authority at that time being with the woman sitting on these mountains was an allegorical reference to Rome. But furthermore, she says in another place, she says there should be time no longer. It reads, that's 17. The doctrines of the 7 races and the 7 rounds of life and evolution around our terrestrial chain of spheres may be found even in Revelation, and in Leviticus chapter 13, verses 15 to 18. The first passage speaks of the 7 kings, of whom 5 have gone, and the second about the 7 Sabbaths, etc. When the 7 thunders or sounds or vowels, one meaning out of the 7, for each such vow relating directly to our own earth and its 7 root races in each round, had uttered their voices, but forbidden the seer to write them, and made him seal up those things. What did the angel standing upon the sea and upon the earth do? He lifted his hand to heaven, and sware by him that liveth for ever and ever, that there should be time no longer. But in the days of the voice of the 7th angel, when he shall begin to sound, the mystery of God of the cycle should be finished. Which means, in theosophic phraseology, that when the 7th round is completed, then time will cease. There shall be time no longer, very naturally, since prolias shall set in, and there will remain no one on earth to keep a division of time during that periodical dissolution and arrest of conscious life. So she brings out a huge amount of basic theosophical teaching in that one piece of chapter 17, verse 2, and it's all recorded in SD 2. Even the Christian editor or author of Revelation has preserved this tradition and speaks of the 7 races, four of which with part of the 5th are gone and 2 have to come. It is stated as plainly as could be stated in chapter 12, verses 9 and 10, that thus saith the angel, and here is the mind that hath wisdom, and so on. It goes to talk about the 7 mountains. And so there is this constant reference back to theosophical teaching in her interpretation of chapter 12. And then again, she moves on to chapter 17 and deals with chapter 17. But before we get to chapter 17, we'll do chapter 13, where she talks about the number 666. Now, I think most people have become totally convinced now that the number 666 doesn't refer to the devil so much as refers to Nero, who fiddled while Rome burned. And apparently there's a way of seeing the name Nero interpreted into producing the number 666. But I don't think Blavatsky knew that at the time, so you can see that Blavatsky herself is not averse to finding solutions to the answer 666, because she didn't live in our particular generation where this puzzle has been solved to most people's satisfaction by interpreting the name Nero. And she says the year 1881, which I think was a pretty fantastic year for her, because it was the year in which she published The Secret Doctrine, I believe. And she says, it is the number of the great beast of Revelation and of St. John's Apocalypse, that Kabbalistic book par excellence. See for yourself. 1 + 8 + 8 + 1 makes 18, which is 3 times 6. And placed in a row, you have the number of the man, 666. So you have to bear in mind that Blavatsky was human, although some people are so keen on Blavatsky in the Theosophical Society that you almost imagine they think she's not. But the teaching goes on. 195. Now, the business about time ceasing, I've already dealt with on chapter 17. Chapter 19, we talk about the man on the white horse. And I saw heaven opened, and behold a white horse, and he that sat upon it was called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he doth judge and make war. And the armies which were in heaven followed him upon white horses, clothed in fine linen, white and clean. And she says, it is said after the Kalka Avarta, he who is expected, is the translation, on the white horse in the Apocalypse, the golden age will begin, and every man will become his own guru. Now, has that age come? Are we all our own gurus now? Do we carry the full weight of our spiritual responsibility on our own shoulders? Do we choose to read the right documents, believe the right things, do the right things, live the right lifestyle that will give us the sort of initiation which was so sought after by the Ancient of Days, through going through all sorts of terrible trials? Have we reached that age? In a way, we have reached that age, because we are in an age where everyone feels free to believe what they want to believe. No longer has the Church or any other religion, except in the case perhaps of some followers of Islam, got authority over people to tell them to do this or do that or do the other. In years gone by, the Church had authority. It's hardly got any authority at all now, and the failure of the vote for women bishops was bewailed more because it cut in to what's left of the Church's authority in today's world than any other single reason. So there was also this prophecy right back in the book of Jeremiah, where Jeremiah said, in those days every man shall bear his own responsibility, in so many words, that no longer will he look to others to teach him what to do and how to behave and how to live the life that leads to spiritual emancipation, but everyone will be his own guru. So there's a most interesting reflection back whether Blavatsky had remembered the writings of Jeremiah when she wrote this in Volume 8 of Collected Writings, or not, I don't know, but it was a very interesting comment on the whole business of the White Horse and what was written there about the heaven being opened. And you see, the verse that she's picked up and quoted on is a verse that is all about lifestyle. It's all about lifestyle, if we really face it. I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse, and he that sat upon him was called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he doth judge and make war. So the emphasis is altogether on faithfulness and truth. And, well, you can yourself decide how much you think modern society has managed to reflect those particular characteristics in today's world. And she says, in Collected Writings, volume 13, she says, the Sayoshant is the prototype of the faithful and the true of Revelation, the same as Vishnu in the Kalka-Avata. Both are expected to appear as the saviour of the world, seated on a white horse and followed by a host of spirits or genii mounted likewise on milk. So here is this prophecy again, which rings chords with people, even in today's world. Surely there's going to come a time in history when God is going to say enough is enough and take over the management of the world. You know, and in 100 years ago, the Theosophical Society was embracing that idea through Krishnamurti. So there was this this lingering desire of people to see the world managed in a totally equitable way, in a way that brings justice to everybody, doesn't downtread everybody. And we reflect it in our first object, you know, to form a nucleus of universal brotherhood of mankind without distinction of race, creed, sex, caste or colour. And to establish that as more than a nucleus in today's world, even to establish it as a nucleus in today's world, where you would need immense energy and power and authority. And we know from everything that we know about what's going on in the world around us today that injustice reigns, that cruelty and hatred reigns. We live in a terrible world, and it's hardly surprising that people still grab hold of these ancient prophecies and believe that the day will come when the world is managed by a supreme overriding authority which causes goodness and truth and righteousness to prevail. And the comments by Blavatsky go on right to the very bitter end of Revelation. She picks up on Revelation 22, verse 16. I, Jesus, have sent mine angel to testify unto you these things in the churches. I am the root and offspring of David, the bright and morning star. And she speaks of, under three different headings, in the Collected Writings, all over the place, she talks about this verse. She said, tracing it back to Greek and Latin origins, this idea of the bright and morning star. And then she, in the Collected Writings again, in book 11, the bright morning star is the Christos, the glorified ego, the Buddhimanas, as said in Revelation chapter 12, verse 16, I, Jesus, am the bright and morning star. And then finally, in the Secret Doctrine, volume 2, page 540, the Trinity was, in truth, only an astronomical triad composed of the Son, the Father, the two planets Mercury, the Sun, and Venus, the Holy Ghost. Sophia, the spirit of wisdom, love and truth, and Lucifer as Christ, the bright and morning star. And so, whether you feel that all that abstractions and comment on the book of Revelation has left you any wiser, I don't know this morning, but that's it for today.
Thank you very much.
I don't guarantee to answer any of them, but give you a try. No, I didn't know.
Did you want to ask that question again?
Well,
Yeah.
Yeah, I can ask it again. So tell me when it's okay to speak.
Go ahead.
You mentioned that it works. That the text works both ways.
It can work both ways, not always. Yeah.
It was written several thousand years ago, and today it acts as a property, present and future. I just wondered if you were aware that Chernobyl, all that entails, actually means wormwood, and the star, the waters became bitter, and so on. And I've always thought that was a very interesting comment.
It's extremely interesting. If I was told at the time of Chernobyl, I certainly had forgotten it.
I have heard that. Any more questions? Something I was wanting to ask, maybe some people don't know about the 7 root races. Would you like to elaborate on those, about the ones in the Bible it says, alluding or symbolically alluding to the 7 root races which Blavatsky first wrote about?
Yeah, well...
What race are we? Yeah.
Well, that was why there was a time and a half of time left, because we are halfway through the 5th root race. This is a process of development of the human being over a period of many, many millions of years to the stage where it's got to today. And we're told that you can divide this period up into 7 parts, and they referred to as 7 root races, and we're halfway through the 5th one now, and that therefore there's 1.5 to go, which is exactly what she's referring to here in her interpretation of the text. And then she says time will be no more, and it all fits together, doesn't it? Because if we enter a pralaya, as we call it in theosophy, we enter a time of not only no time, but no existence. You go outside physical existence completely. And in fact, I don't think anybody really knows on a particular pralaya just how much goes out of existence. Certainly all the physical world and physical universe goes out of existence in a major pralaya. But it may be quite a lot more that goes out of existence as well in terms of spiritual developments and spiritual existences outside of the physical. So it is a huge thing that happens, and certainly time can't exist when there's no one to count it. That's a very good observation, although I, as a scientist, I'm a little bit suspicious that you can't postulate time as long as the Earth orbits the Sun and spins on its axis. If anybody is there, if a consciousness is there to see it happen, then time still exists. But the whole method of interpreting this is to say no. Man has got these 7 periods in which he develops in all sorts of different ways, and it's all described in detail. And that evolution is complete, then that Manvantara is complete, and it's followed inevitably, according to the law of cycles, by a pralaya. Sorry, get it right.
Any questions?
Did you say 1881 was the key year?
Well, she seems to think it was a wonderful year, 1881. That was why she did this fancy arithmetic by adding the 4 numbers together and getting 18, and then dividing by 3 and getting 3 sixes, you see. That's what she did. But I mean, it's purely fatuous, really. I mean, there's no... I see no particular significance in it at all, because everyone is now totally convinced that the building of 3 sixes from the word Nero was a way of everyone understood it at the time that Nero was seen as the great beast because he fiddled while Rome burned. So you know.
You wouldn't need to tell him not to. Yes.
Right. But referring, there are also this whole business of referring to Rome. by using other names is very, very deliberate, and the people would have understood the referring to Rome as the beast or by some other name, but still understand it was Rome, because Rome was the great devil in their eyes because it was dominating the whole of the Middle East.
Did Mother Shipton, she put that year forth, didn't she? End of the world, 1881. Did Mother Shipton?
I don't know.
Shipton, who, as a Yorkshireman, I will claim my own from Knaresborough, who wrote some apocalyptic prophecies. But I don't know whether that links in before Madame Blavatsky's time, but that's quite an interesting reference. Is there any other questions at all?
I think the link with Nero is very modern.
I mean, do you think some people would say Nero, the idea about the Antichrist or whatever, would you buy into that thing with Nero's?
Well, I think in Revelation, the idea of the Antichrist is of the devil who was thrown out of heaven, which got nothing to do with Nero or the number 666 at all. A fallen angel idea, which has got picked up and used a number of times, and only really used because of that verse from the Gospels where Jesus is described as, I saw Satan fall as lightning from heaven. But, I mean, people can imagine all sorts of things. Jesus referring to his existence before he was born, when he was much more, had a greater ascendancy in the spiritual world, and he saw this vision happen, or he saw it in a vision as a prophecy that Satan would fall from heaven in the future, when at the Armageddon, at the end of time. You know, there's a whole... there are so many interwoven interpretations and meanings here that it's very, very difficult to keep your feet on the ground. And according to what you read, you may be persuaded to make one interpretation or to make another. And with Blavatsky herself, she brings out a whole range of interpretations on chapter 12. So, you know, it's a moving target, really, to find out where the truth really lies in this. And the answer is that the truth may not be a single truth. As I said earlier, it may be a truth which applies to the past and another truth which applies to the future, and the same imagery is relevant to both. Because it's working on imagery rather than words, you've got to...
Yes,
when you talk about something being able to be both a reflection of the past and a prophecy into the future, does this begin to have some correlation with today's quantum theory, where particles can be in two different places in the universe, in time, at the same time?
Yes, but in the quantum theory, it's the particles that are coexistent in space and operating on each other in zero time. It's not that they are, that there's any dispute about them existing over a period of history. There's a huge difference here. I don't really find much of a correlation there between the two, really. No.
Any other questions? Well, would you
right.
touch on the idea, certainly you said 100 years ago the Theosophical Society was putting forward the idea of new avatar, world teacher, or do you think that's coming out in Revelation? Blavatsky touch on it?
Well, there's a whole lot in Revelation I've not mentioned this morning. I mean, there's this suggestion that the devil is thrown into the bottomless pit for 1,000 years, and that therefore evil is restrained from acting upon humankind for that period of time, and that there's some sort of world government is able to establish a reign of peace and righteousness and goodness. I think in the beginning of the 20th century, the eyes of the Theosophical Society was turned very much in that direction, with the teaching about Krishnamurti being the world teacher. And of course there's the great hope that with a world teacher you would have establish a world authority in which it was demanded of people that they lived the good life. And it brings all sorts of other issues into play, because isn't the living of the good life supposed to be really a form of initiatory process into understanding the mysteries, just as it was in those days? You know, if you want to understand esoteric things, we're told again and again that you have to live the good life. In The Voice of the Silence, which admittedly HPB translated, she didn't actually write it, she wrote it in English because she translated it from some remote Eastern language. The Voice of the Silence makes it absolutely clear that you, to understand the mysteries, you need to live the life. Just as in the days in the days of the Greek mysteries, the initiates only knew the meaning of the mysteries when they were initiated, because they were told the meaning of the mysteries. So, in a way, the Voice of the Silence says, you know, to really understand what's meant behind all this, you've got to live the life. If you live the life, you don't open the third eye, you don't open your intuition, you don't open up those parts of your consciousness which are able to become aware of these deep mysteries that we're being talked about here. It's a very, very complex issue, yes.
Maybe it's not so much opening the third eye, you sort of, you get into a way of living that there's like synchronicities that come about that wouldn't normally do.
Yeah, well, all sorts of things happen. Yeah, yeah.
I would comment very strongly against, you said, the world government. Don't get it confused with this new world order that is attempting to impose its will on everything.
Don't think
It's not to control and save the world.
No, I wasn't getting involved in this new thing at all. I was talking really in the terms in which Annie Besant talked about how she saw the role of Krishnamurti in becoming a world teacher.
That magazine which you have just described sounds like a very famous phrase. That you seek you not, if you never find it within, and you never find it without.
Absolutely.
That's
Yeah.
a very interesting feature.
Well, that is so true.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the only way of finding God, in inverted commas, the only way of finding your true self is to go within. You'll never find it outside anywhere. Yeah.
Any more questions?
So, don't you think that although Krishnamurti rejected to be seen as the Messiah, he did actually become a world teacher?
Yes,
He was a world
he
teacher.
did become a world teacher.
Yeah, and
I did see a video. He spoke at the United Nations.
Yeah.
They actually announced him
yeah,
as a world teacher, much to his obvious
chagrin.
invitation. In which afterwards he said no more United Nations, but he did actually was announced. Yes, he did. He did indeed become a world teacher of sorts. Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Is there any more questions? Okay, well, thank
More.
you very much. Yes.
Well,
Yeah,
I'm just going to say, you hope you're not more confused than when you came in. That's all.
No, I don't think so. It's part of today. We're having a sort of politic down. If you like, that we have obviously enjoyed the talk, and it's very nicely this morning. So, thank you.